In the beginning was the Word, so it is set down in the Gospel. And so it happens with good homilies. First, you have to write it. There are, to be sure, some gifted preachers who can abruptly soar aloft, and without benefit of written preparation, put their talent on automatic pilot, so as to keep every hearer entranced till they touch down 15 minutes later in a velvet-smooth conclusion. There are such, but I have not met many of them. I suspect they may be as rare as pigeon blood rubies. 95% of us, if we want to offer the congregation something worthwhile, have to do some writing first. Before we speak up, we have to write down. Geniuses aside, it is a law of literature that the easier and pleasanter something is to read, the harder it has been to write. Conversely, the harder and duller something is to read, the easier it has been to write. You don't kid around with nature. At the moment, some priests are beating the drum for witnessing to Jesus. As I understand it, this means that your own religious feeling should spurt out of your sermon like a fountain. Let them know that you've met Jesus and know him and love him. Fine. But there ought to be a good sermon there first, so that you have a base of operations. Warm and genuine emotion is grand, but if people are to listen, the homily has to be attractive, and if they are to be convinced, it has to be logical. Enthusiasm alone is a straw fire, since they're powerful phrases, and we cannot, as a rule, hope. Apt illustrations will hover over our heads like tongues of fire in the midst of spontaneous speech. It follows that for most of us, good preaching must begin with good writing. Good writing begins with good words, bright words, precise words, lively words. Certain words we should not touch with an 11-foot pole. I make reference not to the 4-letter ones, but to the 14-letter ones, the absurd and unnecessarily long words. There is even a very long word to describe these, sesquipedalian. In the old-time minstrel performances, the black-faced endmen deliberately declaimed such jawbreakers to portray pretentious pomposity. We can produce the same effect in the pulpit without meaning to, by serving up the triple-jointed polysyllables. It is to laugh, or at the shame of it, to cry. Suppose you wanted to describe some medieval knights snatching a bite during a lull in the battle. You could say, accoated in the habiliments of conflict, they partook of the available comestibles, and imbibed the current beverage. But the poet puts the same situation this way. They carved at the meal with gloves of steel, and drank red wine through helmets barred. Case rests. In our proper Boston, there is an elite hotel that wears its patrician elegance as prominently as a dowager's dog collar of matched pearls. If you leave by the main revolving door, there is a sign in huge letters, not an accredited egress door. Perhaps it means, if you get hurt passing through here, don't sue us. Or maybe they have so many doors leading to the street that this one doesn't count. In any case, wouldn't it be simpler to say, not an authorized exit? Leave it to Mark Twain to skewer the error of using the almost right word instead of the exactly right one. The difference, he wrote, is the difference between lightning and lightning bug. I knew a pastor once whose preaching vocabulary gave the impression of wearing striped trousers, silk hat, gold cane and spats. He never merely knew something. Rather, he was not unaware that, or he was cognizant of the fact that, or he had been apprised of. If he was speaking before a bishop he salaamed with, "May it please your excellency." I thought of him this morning when I heard a radio announcer say, "If you are in the market for business real estate, you should beware of the new firm of, let us say, Zilch and Zip." My ears stood up at such frankness. Then followed a glowing ad for this new concern. Now it came to me. The announcer had said, "You should be aware of," not "you should beware of." If the copy had just said very simply, "You should know about the firm of," then everything would have been fine. Perhaps a distinction is in place here between the spoken and the written word. When you write, the words are there fixed to the page for re-examination in case of doubt. But the spoken word has to be absorbed in flight, almost like taking in billboards from a whizzing car. The written word can be subtle, indirect, sophisticated, elegant, polished. Better that the spoken word be brief, simple, and immediately clear. Words are weapons. Don't burden yourself with clumsy ones. If you mean oily, don't say oleaginous. If the crowd was noisy, don't make it worse by calling it vociferous. Have in your heart the fear of God, not trepidation of the deity. For a slight service, give the man a small reward, like a tip, not a minuscule emolument. Should your generosity overwhelm him and he passes out, revive him. Leave resuscitate to those public servants who have to write such jargon in their reports, like the police officer who is encouraged to put down. I observed the vehicle proceeding along Clancy Street. At least they can't elevate Clancy Street to Belvedere Boulevard, though wouldn't they like to? Words can be interesting in their own right. You might be speaking about Lazarus or Mary Magdalene and naturally mention their home at Bethany. To most Catholics, Bethany is only a vaguely familiar word, if it is even that. something out of the Bible. Does it not take on more interest and an added dimension if we break the word apart like a walnut and show the inner meat, and even contrast it with similar words? For instance, Bethlehem means house of bread. Bethesda means house of healing. Bethsaida means house of fishing. Bethany means house of the poor man. Pointing out the origin and meaning of names or even of words may be a trivial device, but in preaching we need every little help we can get. The preacher's beat is not bank robberies or the World Series, so the ordinary sermon can hardly expect to throb with excitement. True, the gospel is the greatest story ever told, but to impress listeners, it has to be constantly told in a new way. We do this by having a stable of attractive words bright as jockey silks. If it was a crime in the good old days for Mom to use Dad's finely honed Sheffield razor to pare some stubborn corns, it is a similar atrocity to misuse or blunt a clean, sharp word. Take a word like decimate. It used to mean, and from its derivation should mean, to kill every 10th man. For example, if a prisoner escaped from a concentration camp, the commandant might announce that if it happened again, all the prisoners would be lined up, and every 10th man shot. Then you could rightly say that the prisoners were decimated. Today, like a package that has been damaged by careless handling, decimate has to come to mean massacre. It is the poor word itself that has been massacred. Somehow that revives the story of the two salesmen who were ordering breakfast in a country hotel. One man said, "I'll have orange juice, toast, sausage, scrambled eggs, and coffee." The other man said, "I'll take the same, but eliminate the eggs." The waiter looked puzzled, but he wasn't admitting anything. In a few minutes he was back and said, "Sorry, sir, but our eliminator is broken." If the diner had said, "Omit the eggs," or "skip the eggs," all would have been well. On the other hand, if he had said, "Drop the eggs," he might have got more than he wanted. By the way, doesn't that original word eliminate mean literally, away from my threshold? When you break open a word the way you would a tangerine, you often encounter unlooked-for knowledge. Anna Hempstead Branch stroked it off well. God wove a web of loveliness, of clouds and stars and birds, but made not anything at all. So beautiful as words, perhaps the difference between a man and a monkey is the monkey wrench, but an even deeper distinction swings between the vocabulary of the one and the grunt of the other. From animals come only litters, from men, literature. True, it has been pointed out that one picture is worth 1,000 words, but did it ever occur to you that somebody used words, and not pictures, to make that boast? Besides, words can make glorious pictures of their own. This is the whole theory behind the use of picturesque speech. Can you not see the scene vividly before you when Keats writes, "And the long carpets rose along the gusty floor"? Even one word can be a Kodachrome print all by itself. Words like scarlet, creamy, ashen, coppery, chestnut, straw, saffron, rusty, plum. Up and down the verbal thermometer there are many more degrees than cold or hot. It can be frosty, tingling, numb, wintry, chattering, or it can be, at the other end, steaming, blistering, sweltering, sultry. These are not particularly long words. They are not really. Unusual words, merely unused words. That is, people in ordinary conversation may not employ them often, but when they hear them from the pulpit they will understand them. They do not have them at their fingertips, but they do have them at their eardrums. In the everyday world of casual conversation we look at something. To do otherwise would be to tempt people to look curiously at us. But in the world of writing we dress up that plain word look with many different hats. In the gospel parable, let that angry master not look, but glare at his unforgiving servant. Let David not look, but in his lust leer at Bathsheba. Let the astounded mourners not look, but stare at Lazarus struggling out of his shroud. Let the blind man not look, but first squint through his falling scales. Or take a common word like shine. Do we not get a clearer picture if you say that the rainy street glistened, the distant auto headlight glimmered, the tiny diamond gleamed? In the area of sound, too, words can throw off tones like harp strings. When Dostoevsky was giving some hints to a young writer, he said, "Do a piece for me about an organ grinder and his monkey. And I want to hear those pennies hop and chink." Following that suggestion, will it not be more alive to your hearers if Judas, returning his ill-gotten gains in angry remorse, flings the 30 silver coins spinning and jingling on the temple's marble floor? Or if Joseph's carpenter's saw at Nazareth groans through the stubborn wood, and his plane swishes off curly yellow shavings, sound words produce talking pictures. A water ink clanks down on a garage floor, a light switch clicks on, a trolley sways and rattles around a curve, rain peppers a window pane, a woodpecker drums on the rough bark, a jackhammer clatters on the grey asphalt. Call them, if you like, vivid verbs. They are part of the art of interesting. They give action to thought. They are the difference, in style, between a hot dog and a roast. They offer a wardrobe of colourful words so your ideas need not shuffle in monotonous blue jeans. Use them, and smoke will never merely go up. It will billow or roll or drift or spiral or whatever it is precisely doing. Sparks will never just come down. They will shower or spray or whirl, or whatever the situation is. The compass needle will not merely move. It will quiver or flicker or even slightly stir. But please don't make it oscillate. Not even if it is a windshield wiper. There are many words that people can absorb from the context in print, but heard on the wing go over their heads. Picturesque speech, like most other good things, can be ruined by excess. Literary cosmetics should not be laid on with a trowel. However, most of us fail not by too much, but by too little. Rightly used, picturesque words do not produce fine writing in the rhetorician's frowning sense of precious writing, or pretentious writing, or bombastic writing. Actually, it is precise or exact writing. It is like the fine tuning on a television set. Its purpose is to present not an over-tinted picture, but a faithful, natural one. Picturesque speech is the opposite of vague speech. You do not say tree, you say pine or oak or whatever. You do not say that the dog walked behind the man if you know it was a fat poodle waddling behind a tilting sailor. Never the general, always the particular. For another example, consider the word, say, consider it, and consider better substitutes. The infuriated man does not just say, he roars. The cranky man snaps. The sulky man growls. The sarcastic man sneers. And so on through the whole bilious bunch. At the risk of piling the plate too high, here is one final for instance of vivid verbs. In picturesque writing, people rarely walk. The proud man struts. The lazy man shuffles. The drunken man staggers. The arrogant man swaggers. The tired man trudges. The determined man strides entry in the Bunyan Derby. Down to the last. What goes for verbs holds for adjectives too. Hands can be dirty in a half-dozen different ways. They can be grimy with coal, dusty with ashes, blotched with paint, splattered with mud. To find the right word may mean breaking open Roger's thesaurus, but that is the way a sentence comes alive and a vocabulary is built. Phrases that in their beginning wore a fresh, picturesque complexion, like a teenage cheerleader, can become leathery and creased from too much exposure. The housewife who first smeared that sugary white goo on a cake and called it frosting saw the white glaze of a winter landscape. Today, frosting is only a kitchen cliché. We say it without any thought of its meaning. In fact, we speak of chocolate frosting and orange frosting and pink frosting, enough to make Jack Frost shiver. Speaking of tired clichés, lay your hand on the plays of William Shakespeare and solemnly swear never to say a riot of color. That riot was quelled long ago. Or a blanket of snow. That blanket has been gnawed to shreds by the moths of time. Or the picture of contentment. That picture has long since fallen out of its peeling frame. Or the height of folly, to say that, is the depth of poverty in expression. Recently, the clue in an English crossword puzzle was an old revolver. The answer turned out to be earth, which, once you are broad-minded enough to forget all about firearms, qualifies on both scores. Some combinations of adjectives and nouns are old revolvers too, in the sense that they are continually turning up, whereas they should always be turned down. These are the golden jubilarians of prose, adjective and noun, that have been wedded to each other for uncounted years. You have never met them. What about rosy cheeks, pearly teeth, ruby lips, wrinkled brow, golden opportunity, long-felt want, distinct pleasure, ruthless attack, psychological moment, young hopeful, dire consequences? Alas, the litany is so long. There are phrases too, inseparably joined like Siamese twins, which bright writing avoids like the plague. Get it? Phrases like straight as an arrow, clear as crystal, dead as a doornail, flat as a pancake, flash in the pan, veil of tears. O. Henry once wrote a clever tale called Calloway's Code. It is the final and definitive put-down of all trite, limping clichés. It is worth reading, not just for the story, but for its implicit indictment of the threadbare in language. And by the way, doesn't trite in its origin mean worn away or worn out? Incidentally, though at times O. Henry can be distractingly flamboyant and at other times embarrassingly juvenile, he was blessed with a double-decker talent. He had an imagination as gorgeous as a stained-glass window, and at the same time, a clarity of expression as pellucid as clear glass. That combination is, in itself, a minor miracle. In the seminary, our secular reading was so restricted that I read little except the classics, but during vacation, when I felt a little wild, I used to read O. Henry. When some critic hailed him as the Maupassant of America, O. Henry angrily responded that he had never written a dirty word or sentence in his life. Today, Maupassant would probably be looked upon as literary ivory soap. O. Henry is famous for ending his stories with an unexpected twist whereby the whole plot does a sudden backflip in the last few lines. But don't sell short his crisp sentences and technicolor style. To read him is to learn more than a little. This doesn't mean to throw away your set of Cardinal Newman. It merely suggests that authors like O. Henry can be English lit, without tears. He favored the short word over the long one, the vivid over the dull, the fresh over the trite. And the end result is interest, the goal of the short story writer, but not to be despised by the preacher either.